evident to most people. But to make it clear, building emissions, greenhouse gas emissions from buildings make up 25% of our contribution to greenhouse gases. The timing of this is important because this year, Marin County is going to look at updating its green building ordinances specifically to address this topic, consistent with the Marin County's climate action plan. And then another indication of how timely we are is just 2 nights ago, Peninsula Clean Energy, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and East Bay Clean Energy all held a joint program which was similar in content to the program that we're going to have here today. That is exploring the issue of building electrification, decarbonization, and what a model ordinance might look like, and an effort to try and get the entire jurisdictions which they cover, and in our case, Marin County, what all the cities and towns there, all on the same page as much as possible. So to hear about this, we're going to have 4 speakers. The first is Amy Ryder, who is the local government policy lead for the Building Decarbonization Coalition. She lives in Petaluma. She's held positions with local governmental agencies and consulting firms for more than 20 years, including consulting with Sonoma Clean Power. She holds a bachelor's degrees in energy management and design and a master's degree in water resources policy and planning. Brian Reyes is a sustainability planner on the Marin County Community Development Agency's sustainability team. He has a master's in environmental science and management. He has over 18 years in the government, private, and academic and nonprofit sectors. Before coming to Marin County, he worked for the City and County of San Francisco on the development and implementation of its climate action plan, development of policy, and implementation of a variety of sustainability programs. Brian joined the county staff in May 2021, where he currently implements and coordinates the county's climate protection, green building, low carbon concrete, efficiency, and energy programs, and is intimately involved in the efforts to try and put together an ordinance for Marin County. The third speaker, although he's probably going to be back and forth with Brian, is Corey Bidoff, who is the Sustainability Program Manager for the City of San Rafael. He co-authored and is responsible for implementing San Rafael's Climate Change Action Plan 2030, which is being used as a model for many of the cities in Marin at this point. In addition, Corey is past chair of the Marin Climate Energy Partnership, a consortium of local government and public utilities working together to reduce greenhouse gases. Our fourth presenter is David Muller. David is a professional engineer with more than 4 decades of experience in the renewable electric power sector. He is active in Marin County climate policies. He's a leader of the Marin Sonoma Building Electrification Squad, the Marin Sonoma Electric Vehicle Squad, both of which are outshoots of the Climate Reality Project. And he's also led the Larkspur Climate Group, and David's been instrumental in helping to get climate action plans approved in a number of jurisdictions in Marin. So with that, Amy, if you would share your screen and take it away. Oh, just some ground rules, first of all, right before we do that. So if you have questions for the panelists, put them in chat. We're going to have the questions and answers at the end after all 4 of the speakers have presented. And if we have time after that, we may take some live questions as well. So, all right, Amy.
Thank you so much for that, Ken. And good morning, all. It's a pleasure to be here. You know who you are and where we are. So this is this entry slide is perhaps not necessary at this point, but today is February 18th, 2022, which still boggles the mind that we're going to be talking to you about the Green Building Update proposals. I get to set the stage. we've already done the introductions. I'll be talking to you about the California landscape, what's happening at the state level, both with the energy code and just kind of how the code works. And then what other local jurisdictions have been doing and what we anticipate them doing going into this coming year. And then, as Ken already alluded to, we have the remainder of the presenters talking through what's happening in Marin County and then opportunities for your participation. And then actual participation in this meeting. So as Ken already mentioned, I'm Amy Ryder, and I'm with this organization called the Building Decarbonization Coalition. We are a nonprofit membership-based organization that started in California, but now works nationally, predominantly in New York and California, and increasingly in the edges of the country. But our work is supported through our members, which includes the manufacturers of the equipment that you'll be talking about today, the utility providers. It includes nonprofits like yourselves, and a number of design teams and folks that work in construction. So all things related to buildings and the built environment. And just for clarification, I'm not going to be talking about existing buildings today. I just want to be super clear. That will come up, I'm sure, but new construction policies are what we have so far in the state of California. And so that's really going to be the emphasis of everything I say is focused on new construction. To set the stage a little bit, you'll hear us talk about codes, and the way the building code works in California is every 3 years it gets updated, and the predominant parts that relate to Marine Conservation League's mission are the energy code and the building code, the green building code specifically, which are two parts of a many part item, but they contend with very different things. And so you'll hear us talk about the code, and generally what we're meaning by that is how we build buildings and what the rules are for building buildings. But that might be specifically energy code, which deals more with the energy efficiency side and how energy is generated on site. So this has to do with solar predominantly on building roofs. And then the green building code, which has all these other components, inclusive of an element of kind of an enhanced energy efficiency going above and beyond what the energy code requires. So there's this little bit of back and forth, but they all play together in order to give you what the building code looks like. And I set that stage purposefully just to be able to talk about where the rules are made and how they affect everyone. So there are some really big changes that are happening this time around. So the code cycles for every 3 years, we just approved what will go into effect as of January 1st of 2023, which we call the 2022 code cycle. And the reason this matters for the purposes of electrification is we're starting to see the entire state really push electrification forward. There's multiple studies that show that to be the least cost option for reducing our climate impact when it comes to building stock. And so the more and more electrification you will continue to hear about, and that will continue to rise to the occasion of being both in the regulatory construct, but in our building codes. And that is proven through the 2022 code of having this pretty major changes in it related to electrification, specifically changing the baseline, the expectation of what a minimum building looks like is really, it's not universal all electric building, but it's starting to say you have to have at least a water heater or a space conditioner that runs off of electricity only for all new construction as of 2023, which is a very different situation than it has been in the past, partially because our electric grid has just gotten so much cleaner in the last 20 years. And we can talk more about the science of that if you are interested. We're also starting to look at climate metrics in our decision making around when a code is the right code for you. And so that's a really big shift to actually measure the greenhouse gas emissions from a presumed project in determining whether or not that project can be allowed to be built. Thirdly, one of the biggest differences that is perhaps surprising to people is that if you're using natural gas in your building, you might have a different requirement than if you're just using electricity. And specifically for the state code, that relates to cooking. So many of you have probably heard that there are some pollutants involved and some potential hazards of indoor air quality related to cooking with gas stoves. And so those stoves now, if you keep them in the building, they have to vent at a higher rate and a more efficient rate outside of the building, which is a new standard compared to what it used to be. And they have to be wired so that you are ready to convert to electric cooking later. So there's a lot of things kind of hinting towards how buildings will also play a role in the full 100% clean electric grid of the future. We're not there yet, but there's a lot of grid integrations and things coming that are really obvious in the state code for anybody who's paying attention. So what we're mostly going to be talking about, though, today is how local governments can impact and maybe even leapfrog a little bit the state code. And you'll hear us talk about reach codes just because it's the common shorthand for a local government going above and beyond what the state says is legally the bottom permissible building in the state. So what that means, though, is really could mean all kinds of things. The bottom line is that it is a code that or an ordinance, more accurately, adopted by a local government that goes above and beyond some level of either state code or municipal expectations. So it could be building off of the energy code. It could be building off the green building code, as is really what we're going to be focusing on in Marin, it sounds like. But it could also just be a standalone ordinance that addresses the municipal code, like through the health and safety component. So it's when we say reach code, we mean any one of these things. And this matters because there's just different legal mechanisms, but in the way it's implemented really doesn't have a huge impact. There are some different parameters, but I'll just go through a few of them. Specifically, in order to adopt an energy-based reach code, it has to be cost effective, number one. That is one of the first requirement, and electrification, good news, is cost effective. And the way that's defined is looking at a 25-year expectation of life cycle for a loan of a building, and any initial investments that might have an additional cost that pay for themselves through their efficiency gains. So cost effectiveness is a rule of law when it comes to adopting an energy reach code. It also has to not conflict with federal law. That's what preempted means. And it still has to not undermine the state code. So it still has to be at least as good as the state code to move forward. So I just wanted to frame up, we've been having these conversations a lot over the last couple of years, what's like even legally possible with regard to what local governments can do and how they can really start to take some level of control of climate action within their communities. And so this is a very long and frankly, a little complicated list. I'm not going to go through it all, but really reach codes, as you can see, is the kind of the top action item here, because the state has always encouraged reach codes. It's I've been working on reach codes for, I don't know, 15 years or so, where they actually encourage local governments to experiment a little bit and to say what's possible for future code cycles. And local government action actually very much informs where the state code goes in the future. You're also probably heard in the news about the prohibition of gas infrastructure, a la the city of Berkeley. And so that is a separate mechanism, but a very similar result to a reach code that requires electrification. And so those are the two new construction approaches that have been largely implemented thus far in the state of California. They take a couple of different flavors. They have the natural gas moratorium, I think, is probably the most clear cut, meaning you just can't hook up the system, period, done. The all electric ordinances, this blue column in the middle, is a little bit more nuanced in that jurisdictions do have the opportunity, if they so choose, to pick specific appliances to which that can apply. So it's not the pipe to the building, it is the appliances in the building themselves. So they can take a couple of different shapes, versus the electric preferred ordinance, which is much more of what the state directionality is for the 2022 code cycle, which is giving encouragement towards having electric buildings, but not requiring it. So it actually would say, if you're building with all electric, you don't have to meet as high of an efficiency standard overall if you build with mixed fuels. So I break those down here in terms of the, so far, 57 local governments in the state of California have taken action. This has gone up by 2 this week. Like, this is a constantly moving variable, and one that's kind of exciting to see how many local governments are taking this initiative. And at the same time, there's some challenges with the folks in the field who are trying to meet these standards when they differ one neighborhood to the next. So there's one of the conversations I'm excited about today is the possibility of Marin having consistency. But you can see that by far the all electric model is the most popular today. And that's it for my brief presentation. I'll turn it over to next in line, and look forward to any questions and discussion.
Great. Thanks so much, Amy. So Brian, if you could go ahead and share your screen so you and Corey can kick it off.
Great. And I'm going to actually, oh, go ahead, Ryan.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, go ahead, Corey. I got you.
Great. And apologies, Brian and I just kind of put this together this week, and we haven't ever presented before, but I'm really excited to be presenting with them. I'm a little bit more of the generalist. You know, I'm the sustainability manager for the city of San Rafael, and it's hard for me to get into the weeds for every little thing that we work with. And Brian's been a fantastic partner in the county sustainability team, because they have that deep knowledge and energy stuff that I don't really have the ability to do. So my job is really to figure out what's the best way forward to tackle the things in our climate action plan. So Brian and I and Dana and the team have been working on this for the past couple of months and putting together our path forward. And so I'll talk a little bit about that and set the context and get into new buildings, and then we'll turn it over to Brian to take us home with remodels and then sort of what our plan is going forward. So next slide, please. So as you know, one of the major reasons we're doing this is it's one of the big things in our climate action plan. So we all have climate action plans throughout the county. They're very similar. We may have a little discrepancy in terms of, are we looking for 40% reduction by 2030 or a 60% reduction by 2060? But pretty much all of us have agreed that we need to get to carbon neutral by 2045. And so how do we do that? We need to reduce as much as possible. And then whatever's left over, we need to really work on that whole sequestration piece. Next slide, please. So I'm more familiar with San Rafael's emissions, but county-wide, this is the pie chart of what's in our emissions portfolio. Now, I want to give one caveat. This is what we call an in-boundary emissions inventory. It's really looking at what happens in the county. We're counting the things that we're doing here. It's not taking into account consumption. It's not taking into account all the embedded emissions, that all the stuff we buy. It's not taking into account all of our airplane flights and all those things. If we were to do that, our emissions per household would be probably about 3 times as much as we're measuring right now. But this gives us an opportunity to look at really what's happening here, what we have a little bit more control over, because then we can actually start to implement programs that address those. So as you can see, transportation is one of the biggest ones, but that is kind of the area we have a little bit of least control over as well. So what do we have? We have more control over our building stock, and that is where about 27% of our emissions come from in terms of natural gas, and 30 to 35% depending on which inventory you're looking at for building energy. So next slide, please. So what does that mean in terms of the actual makeup for buildings and the amount? And so Brian put this great slide together, which shows that in 2005, when our electricity was dirtier, it was pretty similar in terms of the amount of emissions coming from electricity versus natural gas. But fortunately, emissions have gone down in our electricity stock So the relative percentage of emissions for the building stock has gone up in terms of natural gas. But next, if you hit the animation, Brian, the actuality, though, is that emissions have gone down in all our buildings, again, because of that higher efficiency that we've been requiring over the years, as well as the fact that electricity is getting greener. Next slide, please. So when we look at a big engagement like this, especially with the idea of let's do this county-wide, we really want to look at who are our main audiences, who are the main stakeholders that we have, and what are their pinch points, what are the challenges. As government, where we work best is to identify obstacles and remove them, to provide incentives, or to provide clear expectations through policy, right? But we need to understand this because in the end, elected officials have to make the tough decision. So what are these challenge points? Let's understand that really well. And Brian, I think that, there you go. And then let's see if we can address them. So some of the pain points that we've heard, because we've been working on this since the last code cycle, is this complexity in implementation. That's one of the biggest pain points that we hear. The codes are challenging. If you look at a building official's shelf, they'll have a shelf that's 3 feet wide of all the codes that they have to do. One binder is the green building codes and the energy codes, but they have so much to look after. So if we keep piling on year after year more complicated codes, it's very challenging for them to implement it. And what they say too is that their building officials tend to be behind the curve. And so applicants come in with much more knowledge about this, and it's harder for them to enforce. So that's an important piece to keep in mind. What that also points to is that there's policy and there's implementation. And if we ignore the implementation part and just go for the strong policy, we end up losing in the end. Unfamiliarity is another piece of it. And the other side of that is not only not builders, contractors, building officials not knowing electrification as much, but it's also that we do what we know. If a contractor has success doing a certain thing, why would they want to leave that success when their customers are happy, right? So we have to pay attention to that. Cost is always an issue, and cost is something we always need to pay attention to. We're very fortunate in this, in that the cost barriers seem to be very, very low in this situation. Maybe the appliances are a lot more expensive up front, but in the long run, they pay off. Lack of electrical service is a big pinch point. My own example, I wanted to replace our gas water heater with an electric water heater. And what I found was that the service coming into the house was not adequate. I'd have to go to PG&E, have them trench new lines and provide a lot more service to the house, which our electrician estimated at about $20,000. Well, that's a major pinch point. Conflict with affordable housing right now, and this is a false choice, but the idea that what I'm hearing is, my God, don't do anything that's going to affect the increase in affordable housing. That's a major goal that we all have right now. Well, fortunately, that's not a conflict, but that's a concern. We're hearing that as a pain point. We need to address that. Of course, the whole idea of people love their gas stoves. There's the idea of permit avoidance and enforcement, and making sure that whatever we have, people can actually enforce it. The building officials can actually enforce it. And if you provide too many challenge points for applicants and contractors, well, they'll just avoid the permit counter. And then we have no opportunity to enforce. So we want to pay attention to that too. And then inconsistency across jurisdictions is one of the pain points that we've heard from the building association, in that the contractors say they'll go to San Rafael and they've got one set of rules and how to comply. Go to the county and it's a different set. Then they go to San Anselmo, it's a third set. That costs them time, money, it's confusing, and it's very hard for them to comply, even if they want to comply. So we want to pay attention to that. And of course, power outages is one that you're going to hear a lot, and we've heard too. Well, if I go to all electric, I don't have the redundancy of natural gas. What happens now if I have electric for my heating and the power goes out? Well, the public safety power shutoffs, of course, are happening a lot less. So that's not as much of an issue, but still, we do have some power outages. And then there's going to be other things that come up as well. For instance, some grid stability and capacity and those types of things. So that's just for us to be mindful. Next slide, please. So what we did was we came up with a set of guiding principles for the process this year. And the guiding principles are kind of a great North Star for us to keep looking back at. And of course, the biggest one is we want to reduce as many greenhouse gas emissions as possible through this process. We want to make it easy for folks, right? We want to avoid that complexity issue that we come across. The costs, we want to address the costs. What are the costs? Be real about that and look for ways to make sure that we reduce the costs or we're not having that be a barrier. equity, we want to look for co-benefits whenever possible, right? How can this work in a way with multifamily dwellings that actually adds to the tenant's comfort and cost reductions? Uniformity, this big piece about making sure that it's uniform across all jurisdictions. If we have uniformity, even if we don't have the highest requirements, if we have uniformity, we actually get a lot more greenhouse gas emissions. We get everybody to the table, people can understand what's happening and comply much more easily. Balance, the idea here is, first of all, not greenwashing, right? If we're working with skeptics, we need to be as real as possible. Otherwise, they'll sniff that out right away and we'll lose trust. The other thing is engaging. That's what we're doing here. Brian's already addressed the planning directors. We need to engage people early and often and make sure that we're addressing all these pain points early so we build confidence throughout the process. And then the solutions piece is like, whenever possible, when we know what those pain points are, let's be very clear about what those solutions can be wherever we can address them. Next slide, please. And so here's what happened in 2019. And you'll see we weren't consistent at all. Unfortunately, we couldn't get everybody to do this. And one of the reasons is because we worked at a staff level and the county did a fantastic job at the staff level, but we didn't really prep the electeds to the point that we needed to do and bring them along and make sure we're engaging folks to make sure that that expectation was there and that we were all moving together and that those pain points weren't addressed so that people were comfortable moving forward as a whole. This is a really key important piece this year if we're going to make this happen countywide. Next slide, please. And so what are our basic proposals right now? The way that we're moving forward and looking at this is one, this all electric for new construction policy, where it's easy, all electric. And for remodels, it's this energy efficiency requirements. That's a menu that Brian will get into more, that simplifies things, but also provides really clear guidance so that we can get the maximum benefit for remodels as well. Next slide. And so for new construction, what we're considering pursuing right now is an all-electric reach code that basically is an on-off. It's all electric, that's it. It makes it very simple. You don't have to do these tiered requirements that can be very complicated as well. Next slide. And the way we're proposing to do it is the health and safety code versus the green building or energy code. And this means that local elected officials have more control over it. They can make the determination. It underscores the health impacts, the health and safety piece of it. It eliminates the need for a cost effectiveness study, and it eliminates the need to update it every 3 years and to redo that every three years. It's basically, as I understand it, one and done. Next slide. And how does that work for multifamily affordable housing? Again, because this is one of the big concerns and the big areas that we need to address. First of all, luckily, we're learning that it's not cost prohibitive as long as it's done right. If you don't have to include that natural gas line to the building, saves developers, and there's studies to show it, it saves developers. And the best part right now is we've got some examples right here in Marin. The Los Gamos project in San Rafael just committed to going all electric thanks to some great work by somebody that's going to be presenting soon, David Muller, who just at the right time approached them and said, you know, this is not a big lift. You should really consider this. And they were very happy to do it. And then a couple of developments in Nevada as well, one that's an affordable housing development that have all decided to go electric. So the timing is right. It's really a good time to do this. And next slide, please. And now I'll turn it over to Brian to go into the renovations piece and what our next steps are. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. So Corey was talking about new construction, and that's super important. But the majority of our building stock, over 80, is existing single family and single family residences. So it's really important to address remodels and renovations. So for remodels and renovations of existing residences, including, again, single and multifamily, we're pursuing requirements that renovations meet a target energy score using a point system that allows for a flexible range of building measures and presents opportunities to possibly favor heat pump space and water heaters. Local jurisdictions now, which is super exciting, have a cost effectiveness justification as compared to the last REACH code 2019 cycle. So now we can develop energy efficiency REACH codes for single and multifamily instead of defaulting to the state minimum baseline. So fortunately, to support our code adoption and the local government across the state, adoption efforts this code cycle, the CPUC funded a statewide codes team to develop an open source flexible measures compliance tool. So this tool streamlines our local government's ability to develop a model ordinance by bringing it right to our fingertips. Just diving a little bit more into this compliance tool, there's a lot to be said about this new tool, and I'll try to sum it up as best as I can. So again, as I said, in previous code cycles, passing energy recodes typically place energy efficient requirements only on new construction, but now again, we can just demonstrate cost effectiveness for existing buildings. So this tool will help us develop a REACH code for residential remodels by boiling compliance down to what is essentially a point-based scoring system. So in contrast to previous schemes, such as with the county and San Anselmo and Mill Valley, our previous schemes were electric preferred. Those schemes were incentivized, and all of our schemes in general were rigid compliance measures. This tool is more of a flexible building measures builder, which gives applicants for building types the ability to flexibly choose from an expanded list of energy efficiency measures. So not just appliances such as heat pumps, but also measures such as insulation, duct sealing, cool roofs, and PV, among others. So for this code cycle, we can develop a flexible compliance table and policy in just minutes that meets the state's cost-effective requirement. So this tool is integrated within the existing cost effectiveness explorer that's available online, and you'll get a link to that resource later after this presentation. So here's an example of the output. And so this is a sample of a weighted measures compliance table for a typical residential single family renovation in climate zone 3, which is basically the climate zones in Marin County. It's also climate zone 2. So when you create a policy with this tool, there's a variety of measures that would be generated. Here you see results from a cost effectiveness study from which we can determine the desired target savings. Up at top, you see there. And it's delineated by vintage type, which is a fancy word of saying by different ages of your building. So then that explorer, once proven cost effectiveness, and these measures are cost effective, creates a weighted menu of measures or a table that we see here. And you see a whole list of different measures, efficiency and renewables, as well as electrification. So to comply with the policy, a permanent applicant will locate the target score that applies for their home's construction year at the top of each table. Then they are free to install any combinations of measures from that table that adds up to that target score. The points that you see here are based on actual energy savings. So in this example, you see to the left column pre-1978, we have a target score of 7. The applicant can install a combination of what you see there in bold: duct sealing only for 4 points, water heating package for 2 points, LED and photo sensors for 1 point. So that adds up to 7. Or if someone wants to take a prescriptive PV system installation or installation of the heat pump water heater, they just install that, and they, for that renovation, have gone above and beyond that target and simply 1 appliance and done. And then there's certain measures you can make mandatory, in this case for the state code, electric readiness mandatory. All right, next slide. So that's renovations and really getting at the whole building. There's other considerations that we need to consider for existing. So requiring and aligning with or exceeding the state EV requirements is first something that has been the precedence of Marin County, and we anticipate that we'll probably go above and beyond this code cycle. So it's something for us to discuss and figure out later on. Number 2, There's actually non-energy green building reach codes, as Amy was alluding to earlier, and that will likely to be considered upon collaboration with all jurisdictions. Specifically, what code level we should go above and beyond the state Cal Green codes. There's this definition of tier 1 or tier 2. Lastly, we're pursuing several encouraging and promoting access to measures to encourage and incent people to install heat pump space and water heaters. So when their existing gas fuel models need replacement. So to clarify, we're not proposing a requirement, time of replacement, as it's called, or time of burnout. We're promoting the wide availability of really existing incentives better to the public and to contractors is really already on its way. So just need to cover this point is, so here's what's already available for heat pump water heaters. They are growing in popularity. And with that, the demand for also quality contractors to install them as well. So substantial rebates are available. They total up to about $4,800 for qualifying units when customers have them installed by a participating contractor. So the following table here outlines the potential rebate amounts available for one heat pump water heater installation when you are a BayREN, it's a regional energy network home, so you are in BayREN, plus a qualifying contractor, and your customer, us, is in Marin County. So there is a combination of state, which is called tech incentives, regional, BayREN, and then local here, we have Electrify Marin, and you can stack those all together to a total of about $4,800 for qualifying units. So that's the policy part, and the biggest legwork is engagement. So our twin engagement goals for this code cycle, along with the 8 guiding principles that Corey illustrated. First, to develop city, town, and county building reach codes for new construction and renovations by fall of 2022. But our other twin engagement goal is to, as Corey mentioned, to adopt uniform building codes countywide that are consistent across all jurisdictions. It turns out that it is a value proposition for not only the building community, but also for our inspectors and for a variety of other interests. So what we have done, and I'm just going to explain, is our approach to stakeholder engagement. So we've bucketed stakeholders in 5 engagement tracks. Right now, we have a steering committee, which consists of the county in partnership with San Rafael Planning and Corey, and San Anselmo's building official, Erica Freeman, and MCE Clean Energy, Sebastian Kahn, who I believe is on this call. And together, we're trying to not shape the code, just kind of say, what is our engagement approach? How do we get everyone on board? What stakeholders are out there, including the environmental advocate community, that we need to get engaged? So that's one track. Second track is a technical working group, which will write and shape draft iterations of the ordinance. So this consists of city, town, county staff, chief building officials, planning or sustainability staff. Third is the environmental, equity, social, affordable housing advocate community. So that's more of our community engagers. And so that includes you all with Marine Conservation League, Marin Sonoma Electrification Squad, and other affordable housing developers and advocates like EAH, RCD developers. So it's important that it's not just, hey, you're a group, we're going to give you a presentation. We're looking for you all, as we go through the iterations of the draft ordinance, feedback. And we're creating feedback loops for that. So you all will have an opportunity to provide inputs, as well as view the draft iterations of our green building ordinance before it goes to our electeds. And that still also goes the same for the building community, including Marin Builders Association. And then we'll have the 5th track, which is our general public workshops, which is kind of open to everyone all within a room. So that's briefly our 5 engagement tracks and our approach to stakeholder engagement. A lot more to that, but I'll just leave it to this high level for now. So here's sort of our next engagement steps. So today, all the way to fall 2022, when we hope to adopt. February 18th is today. We are beginning our engagement with the environmental advocacy stakeholders. And under development right now, from March to August, we'll start the technical working group, where we'll have recurring meetings. We'll have ad hoc meetings and interactions with our city, town, sustainability, and climate committees or commissions. Those are our appointed officials. In April, we'll aim to have a broad community engagement public workshop. June through July, we'll engage the community more focus groups workshops. So that includes the building community as well as the environmental advocacy community. And June through August is when we start the legislative process. So the city, town, community reviews our ordinance iterations that contains the feedback from the community. And then from June to October, October being the adoption time, we have elected officials reviewing as they do through their legislative process. And then in October, we have what we call our first reading, which is sort of the introduction of this ordinance that hopefully we all have developed together. Okay, so I'm going to breeze through this, but essentially today we're in February when we started the stakeholder meetings. And then from August to September, we're going to draft our code, our ordinance, and hopefully provide the support that other jurisdictions, cities and towns can also draft their ordinance. Remember, it's not the county that's going to draft it for them. We provide a model ordinance and provide the support, whether it's presenting to the councils or providing the appropriate documentation and ordinance language that they themselves can adapt. But it's up to them by October to have the first reading and November second reading. Between November until the code will go in effect in 2023, it's a lot of submittals and approvals from the Energy Commission. Okay, so I'll take a poll right now, and if you follow this link in the chat, I'll have the chat, excuse me. If everyone just go in the chat, and I'll give you a couple seconds, and I'm just going to take a quick poll, and it's a word cloud if you haven't done this before. Hopefully everyone's in chat, and you're probably seeing a page that says waiting for Brian Reyes to let you in. Is everyone okay? Can I give some thumbs up? Cool. Okay, now I'm going to present. Okay, question in one word. Please try to keep it to one word. I know we have a lot to say. What do you see as the biggest obstacle, given the presentation that we give? What do you see as the biggest obstacle for your respective jurisdiction to adopt an all-electric for new construction REACH code? I know there's renovations, but I just want to ask about new construction. So take some time, think about it in one word, and go ahead and pop it in your response. Uncertainty, litigation, cost, leadership, fear, power, understanding, fragmentation, ease. Leadership is highlighting litigation. I'll take about 30 more seconds. This is great. Business and bandwidth, ignorance, fear. Still flowing. Poll is full and no longer accepting responses. Okay, looks like we're done. So it seems like the biggest obstacles that we face, and of course I'll share this with you all, is education, leadership, and it looks like litigation and uncertainties. Did anyone want to quickly explain what they meant by litigation? Anyone want to chime in?
Yes, this is Al from Mill Valley, and we had some issues around vegetation management where there was a frivolous lawsuit relating to some of the vegetation management initiatives that the city was implementing in wildfire season, and it just cost the city a lot of money, and the city is pretty gun shy about being out in front of anything where they perceive risk of the members of the city filing expensive lawsuits that we all bear the cost of.
Great. Thank you for sharing now. Appreciate that. Okay. If we'll, again, we'll have this slideshow and some of this information, this word cloud available to you all. I want to transition over to Ken Strong. Everyone, thank you so much for your participation. Ken, and then I believe it's David, are you up?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, David. I couldn't get out of the poll.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I had the same challenge. I started early because I figured it would be challenging for me. All right, can you see my slides there?
Yes.
All right. Okay, I am going to talk about participation opportunities in this, what I'm going to call a campaign that we're all embarking on here for the county and the 11 other Marin jurisdictions to adopt this updated green building code. And this is maybe the most important thing we're going to do today. Everything up to this point has been sort of informational, you know, talking about it, what it is, how it works, why we're doing it, what others are doing. What I'm going to talk about is how each of you can help get this effort over the finish line. So hang on just a minute here. There we go. And I have to say, before I start on my slides, we hadn't really shared slideshows before we started here. So there's a little bit of repeat, but just bear with me on this. So we've already talked about that the use of natural gas, which is predominantly methane in buildings in Marin County, is responsible for about 1/4, the actual number 27% of our emissions, second only to transportation. And most of the greenhouse gas emissions from use of the gas in buildings are from space and water heating. It's not from ornamental fireplaces and cooktops. It's space and water heating. As has been touched on a little bit, alternatives are available now. They're cost effective. They're electric heat pumps. And they're in some parts of our country, they're the standard. There's what predominant. California is somewhat unique in that most residents in California use gas for space and water heating, but throughout the world and in much parts of this country, heat pumps are the main thing. So in terms of opportunity, this is really a unique opportunity. It's achievable to stop making the problem worse with regard to new residences and to start chipping away at that 1/4 of our current emissions, which is existing residents, and to do this countywide. Now, Amy pointed out that 57 jurisdictions in California have taken some action, some of them some very big action around building electrification. Think of this, 12 jurisdictions in Marin. Right now, one of them has adopted an all-electric ordinance. We have the opportunity here to move 11 more jurisdictions into that all-electric ordinance category. This is big. I put some numbers here to really show how important this is. I think most of you are aware of the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. RHNA is requiring just over 14,000 new residential units in Marin by 2030. And just stop and think. Right now, there is nothing in place that would keep these units from having gas appliances right now. Now, as of January 1st, 23, the state code will move them toward having either a heat pumps, space heater or water heater, but right now there's nothing. We're talking tens of thousands of tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. Additionally, think about this. There's about 114,000 housing units in Marin County. They say that gas furnaces and water heaters last about 15 years. That means, if you think about those numbers, that's 15,000 replacements per year in Marin. And right now, as already mentioned, most of those will be replaced in kind by gas burning appliances. And those appliances will continue to operate and emit thousands of tons of greenhouse gases for their entire life. So we really need to get on that existing housing stock as well. There is urgency around this. Amy talked a little bit about the the 2022 code cycle of the state energy code is going to require some requirements, but not all electric. And the fact of the matter is there are two agencies that are working on this. One is the California Energy Commission. It's expected the next cycle building code will require all electric. And the Bay Area Air Quality Management District is working on emission standards. But none of those requirements will be in place for 5 to 7 years. So that means all those RENA residences, all those replacements, they're all going to continue to be gas, predominantly gas, unless local ordinances are passed to fill that gap. So right now, there's proposals for thousands of units in Marin right now. They're pending and some are being approved. Corey referred to the neighborhood at Los Gatos was approved just last Monday. And that was for 192 units. Fortunately, the developer agreed to go all electric on that. But there's no guarantee that the thousands of units that are also pending right now would go that same path. And then this last point is really important, that most owners of existing homes are simply unaware of this, unaware of the options, unaware of their importance, unaware of the issue. And most HVAC contractors, I know there's people on the phone who have been and done this. When your unit goes out, they want to replace it with the same gas burning unit. They just aren't aware, and they certainly are not promoting heat pumps. So we talked about this already a little bit about trying to bring all 11 Marin jurisdictions other than the county along. They should like this. As has already been noted, they're all going to be updating their building code requirements effective January 1st, 23 anyway, to meet the current code cycle. Most jurisdictions, as has been mentioned too, have building electrification goals in their climate action plans, and this will help them meet those goals. It's a great chance for the smaller jurisdictions to leverage county staff and resources to do most of the work. And this is huge because although a few of the larger jurisdictions have their own sustainability coordinator, most do not. It's already been mentioned, enforcement will be simplified if all jurisdictions have the same. And it's already been mentioned that a lot of other Bay Area jurisdictions have adopted all electric ordinances. So this is not cutting edge. And it's also been mentioned, contractors appreciate uniform requirements from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So I also made a list of hurdles. They're somewhat overlapping with the pinch points that were gone over. But there's some additional things here. Really, most people, including our electeds, don't know about the issue. They just don't know about it. HVAC contractors are not knowledgeable about heat pumps and the available incentives. The current codes don't require it. It's already been mentioned there are equity issues. However, these can be addressed through incentives and exceptions for income qualified. And although all electric costs less for new residents, has been pointed out, the initial costs for heat pumps can be higher for existing residences, but those incentives, and the table was put up there, Brian did, really can help offset this, maybe completely offset it. And then there's this last point, which we cannot overlook. People are passionate about their gas cooktops. And as soon as you start talking about gas, they say, no, we're not going to take away my cooktop. I love it. But we're not talking about existing cooktops. We're talking about existing space and water heaters. And that's a very, very important distinction to make. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the participation part. This is not going to happen without your help. The county is committed to adopting an updated green building code. And it's already been described what I don't include. The county is also very committed to reaching out to Marin's other 11 jurisdictions. But there's no certainty that all or any really of the other 11 jurisdictions will engage or join the county. And I want to remind you of that table that I think it was Brian put up that showed the results of the 2019 effort when the county adopted its current green building code. And what you saw in there is ultimately only 3 jurisdictions. The county and 2 other jurisdictions adopted that. Some others went a little bit further than required state codes, but 5 jurisdictions, 5 out of 12, did nothing beyond the state code, even though the county was leading the charge and encouraging others, reaching out to the jurisdictions. So yeah, some of the other jurisdictions might engage with the county, but it's very likely that some won't without a serious push by their constituents, their residents. And then this last point, as was pointed out by Corey and Brian, the plan right now is to target new residences and renovations, major remodels. But there's really no certainty at this point how this issue of replacement on burnout of existing gas and water heaters is going to be addressed. There's a bunch of stuff out there, but there's a real question is how to aggregate that up so it's big and it's out there and people know about it. So that's something we're going to need to work on. So these are the kind of citizen advocate actions that we're anticipating are going to be needed. Obviously, support, inform, and encourage county staff. And there's quite a bit of all this already happening. And I'm delighted to report to everyone that Brian and Corey have been incredibly receptive to this and are very open to input from the community. We're going to need people to actively participate in all those workshops and reviews that were described as part of the process in Brian's presentation. We're going to need to build support among the supervisors to adopt the Green Building Code and also how to address replacement of gas, space and water heaters with heat pumps in the existing residences when they burn out. And this next one is the really big one we're going to have to do as citizen advocates is to educate and build support among the electeds in all Marin jurisdictions to engage in the process with the county as they develop this and adopt the same ordinance. It's virtually certain, even with all the outreach the county will do, and we just heard it in that poll that was done, some jurisdictions will just sit on the sideline, don't have the bandwidth, focused on other things, don't have staff, whatever. It's going to take our effort to get them in there. And I have this note at the bottom of the slide. County staff obviously is going to inform and engage the jurisdictions through the processes that Brian described there, but also through MCEP, Marin Climate Energy Partnership, and MCCMC, which is a forum for all elected officials of each of the jurisdictions. So there's going to be a lot of outreach, but we're going to need citizen involvement as well. So how you can help. So this is the part, this slide and the next slide are the really important ones from my presentation. And I want you to really focus on this because one of the risks, in a presentation like we're doing today is everybody gets all this good information and then they go on to whatever's next for them. But we really need citizen action to get this one across the finish line. So how you can help. Participate on a city town specific team to influence your council. This may be the most important thing, especially for those jurisdictions that are not going to jump at this opportunity. We're going to need each jurisdiction to have at least a small team of people who are ready, willing, and able to go speak at the public comment period, to encourage electeds to direct their staff to participate, and to really build that commitment of each jurisdiction. We're going to need people to participate in the public workshops and the reviews by the county. We are anticipating probably meeting one-on-one or maybe three-on-one with each of the supervisors. And for these meetings, we would like to have people in their jurisdiction involved in that. So if you have a great relationship with your supervisor, we'd like to get you involved in those. And this is because right now there's two of the supervisors, Supervisor Moulton Peters and Connolly, are the county's climate committee. We don't really know where the other supervisors are on this matter, but we want to make sure they all know and hear from their constituents. Meet with supportive electeds on your council. This is one of the really important ones. Anyone who's been involved in local politics knows that while some stuff happens at the public meetings, most of the stuff happens in small meetings directly with the elected officials to try and go through the things I was talking about earlier about educating them and why it's important to you and what the challenges are and so on. Very, very difficult to bring those out in a public meeting. Send supportive letters to the IJ. Most electeds read those letters to the editor sections to find out what's going on in the community. Encourage Marin organizations to write supportive letters to the Board of Supervisors and councils. I know for a fact that participants in today's meeting represent at least 20 or 30 different organizations. We're going to want to tap into all those. Regularly speak during public comment time at Board of Supervisor and council meetings to start socializing this issue. The issue needs to be introduced and discussed. The county's doing that with staff, but we need to start doing it with the electeds. And ask your supportive electeds to bring this up at MCCMC and at other forums to encourage the Board of Supervisors to act. It's an interesting dynamic here where the county can certainly influence what the jurisdictions do, but the reverse is also true. If enough jurisdictions say, we really want this, it also affects what the county does. And this note at the bottom, I'm representing today the Marin Sonoma Building Electrification Squad, and we are perfectly willing to provide talking points and assistance on all these ways that you can help. Okay, so this is the important one. It's time to step forward. I know most of you are very interested in this topic. I hope most of you want to help. So I'm going to ask that you indicate in the chat or send me an email. On the final slide here, we'll have my email address if you can help with this campaign. It doesn't mean you're committing much. It just means you're a person in a jurisdiction that's willing to write a letter, speak at a public comment period, meet with your supervisor, whatever it is you can do. We need to know who's out there. We have a lot of names already, but we need to know who's out there who can help with this. And be sure and indicate the town or city where you live and provide your contact information, because elected officials are way more influenced by their own constituents than those from other jurisdictions. We're particularly looking for people who can be part of their community team so that they can bring this matter to their council, not all the councils, but their council. And like I said, we're also looking for people who have positive relationships with their specific council members or supervisors for those small group meetings where you can really get into the details and why it's important and how you'd like to see this go. So here's my final slide. And I heard this quote recently, and I'm sorry to say, I don't remember exactly where it came from, but I thought it was just absolutely on spot. The worst thing you can do regarding climate change is to assume someone else is going to solve it. We have a real opportunity here to really move the dial in Marin County, not just in the county jurisdiction, but in all 12 jurisdictions, to bring along over 100,000 residential households, 14,000 targeted new RENA residences. This really is a big thing. So I'm asking you all to step up, send me your contact information in the chat, or send me an email. My email address is right there, or you can call me if you want. But this is the time to step up and get involved and not just take the information away, but actually act on it. You can become part of the solution. All right, that's the end of my presentation. Ken, back to you.
Thanks so much, David and Brian and Corey. And I know that Amy had a hard stop at 10, so she isn't here. At this point, Bob, you've been sort of watching the chat, the questions in chat. Are there some that you'd like to ask the panelists?
Sure. I first want to thank the panelists. Those were terrific presentations. So the first one is from Ken Strong. How do you plan to define new construction versus major renovation in order to differentiate when all electric is required versus use of the point system? Panelists?
Well, I'll jump in. I think this is actually one of the things that is on the top of our engagement list for the chief building officials. One of the challenges too is not just about the policy, but the definitions from one jurisdiction to another. And we do have different definitions of what constitutes new versus a remodel. And there are only, I think, Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there may be only a couple of jurisdictions that actually define what a major remodel is. And so that inconsistency is something that I know I've heard from some chief building officials that they'd really like to resolve as well. It's to be seen whether or not we can get that consistency to happen across jurisdictions too, but I think that would be really valuable for everybody if we had consistent definitions. And then there's also permitting software, which changes different from city to county to different cities. So that's something that we're looking at as well and trying to understand, what are all the things that we can line up and get in sync, because that is a challenge point. Do you want to add anything, Brian, or do you have anything to correct?
Yeah, and I would add to that, if sort of one of those things, do we try to tackle everything all at once? Because a lot of these solutions to or these pain points and these challenges can be had, but it's all about timing. Like, what do we want to prioritize sometimes? If trying to chew it all off out at once, it could really either undermine what we're really trying to get at. So we have to sort of choose what, as collectively, what we would like to prioritize. So yeah, I mean, things like substantial remodel, do we, that's, that's another item, we're trying to prioritize. It seems like everyone wants to prioritize, all electric and new construction and get at renovations, and EVs. I mean, do we have the appetite to take on so many of these other things? So it's important to surface them, I think, this code cycle, and then choose what we'd really like to go after this code cycle.
Okay, anything else from the others? If not, there's a question from Bill Carney, which is, will the countywide effort achieve San Rafael's General Plan 2040 direction? And then there's a long quote from a part of the general plan, which basically states that the desire is to implement electrification of building systems and appliances in new buildings and those that currently use natural gas. That this should be achieved by requiring new or replacement furnaces and appliances to be electric and utilize fossil-free energy.
So thanks for that, Bill. Yeah, and the measure asks for an analysis of that to understand whether that's something we can do or not. So the first half of it is taken care of, right? Or hopefully will be if we pass it for new buildings. So the question is these replacements of appliances, and that's a major pinch point. There are stories of not just mine where the service is not adequate, but where somebody wanted to do all electric for their house and the actual transformer for the neighborhood didn't have enough service. It gets really challenging to require those upon burnout, especially when we have the challenges around contractors understanding, being able to get access to it. We've heard a number of people, even people in the space, that have been trying to make their existing homes become all electric and really struggling finding contractors that can do it for them. So there's a lot of pinch points for that to be required. So right now what we're looking at is what are the best opportunities to get people to move to all electric when they replace their appliances. And instead of looking at it as part of the code update, we're looking at it as in part of the implementation piece, which is Brian's slide about, holy cats, it could be really cheap. You could actually do it practically for free with all the rebates that are out there. So how do we get that out there in front of people? When someone comes to the counter and wants to do a major remodel, first of all, the efficiency tool, the flex tool that Brian showed, favors electrification dramatically. You could do 3 or 4 different things to get to your point total, or guess what? You could swap out your water heater, one and done, and you've met your point. So it favors them dramatically. So that's one way to get at it. And the other is to make sure that we pair all of the, and this is a challenging one, but to pair all of the incentives every time somebody comes for a remodel. Hey, guess what? You can do it really easily by moving to an electric appliance, and you can get all these rebates at the same time. But that's that nuance and challenge of making sure that in the implementation, it all happens well. But that's the way that we're looking at it right now.
Okay. So there's another question from
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
Bob, can I respond to that last question
Sure.
a little bit also? The point that I want to make, and this is, I totally hear and respect what Brian's response was there, and it is a pinch point. There are major pinch points around that. However, there are 2 or 3 things that I think we can do that can go much beyond what we've got right now. And I'm hoping that this will be part of the dialogues that community members will have with their elected officials as well as the supervisors. And the couple of things that I have in mind is there's a lot of other actions besides incentives that a jurisdiction or jurisdictions can take to help move people toward voluntarily replacing their burnout appliances. And I'm working with both Corey and Brian to share those many approaches. Secondly, what some jurisdictions are looking at is using the required tool, but having exceptions around those exact pinch points. So if you don't have adequate, service to your house, if you, are income challenged, whatever the pinch points are, is make it required and have exceptions around those. The question is, there's a lot of people who could go ahead and replace their gas appliances with heat pumps if given more assistance. And what we want to do is not have those people not go down those paths simply because not everybody can go down that path. So it really is the source of that 25% of our greenhouse gas emissions. Those new buildings don't yet exist. Those remodels don't yet exist. We really need to start addressing this, and the Marin Sonoma Building Electrification Squad is hoping that that will be part of this effort.
Okay, I'm going to move on to another question, another good question from Bill Carney, which is a question for Brian. And it has to do with the points in the flexible compliance table. Are those points based on relative greenhouse gas reductions? Seems like they should be.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Sorry, that was on mute. I thought it was mute for a second. Yes. I did respond to, I think I did in the chat. So Bill and everyone, I put a link to a briefing of that video, a short briefing in a video on that tool and how it works. So regarding GHG reductions, they are integrated into selecting these measures and can be assorted accordingly. Be aware that if you do prioritize GHG reductions, you probably will limit the flexibility of measures. And again, ultimately, state code requires that those measures be cost effective. So, but they can be, when looking at that tool and selecting sort of the measures and what's prioritized, it's cost effectiveness, as Amy Ryder described. And there's also ways to sort it with other measures such as GHG reductions. Again, I think that ultimately the GHG reductions are really going to come from electrification. So, as Corey said just earlier in the answer, that when in this point system, there's ways to favor the electrification, but in absence of that, because everyone is different, I think it is important to give people the flexibility of saying, hey, if I insulate what I have existing right now, that actually can give you a lot of energy savings. And, depending if people can afford it, Corey's example of the $20,000, because there was this other thing other than the appliance itself, I don't know, many people will go with a $20,000 change, depending where you live. So, it's good to offer options beyond just GHGs, and they can be equally effective. And lastly, I want to say there's more than just GHGs. There's also reliability and resilience. So, in fire season, insulation would be good, and really sealing your house, from air quality issues. So there's a lot of things. I'm not saying that there's one way or the other. It's just a lot of things to consider as we are developing this policy.
Okay, then there's a question from David Haskell, who's concerned about the long-term costs of providing electricity through PG&E, that the most effective way to provide electricity is solar, which if it's less costly, it drives down the cost of conversion. guess the question he has is, why no discussion of solar here? I mean, what is the connection of this to solar?
I'm happy to jump in, and I probably pose a question back just as much. At least for residential, my understanding is that the state already has requirements for solar for new residential. And in terms of renovations, I personally haven't thought too much about it. And I guess my question would be, and David, you can reach out offline if you'd like to, is if there are any suggestions or ideas about how to address this through this process this year. It'd be interesting to see if people have thoughts. I don't know if Brian or David have any thoughts about it as well.
The one thing I would add to that is, the focus right now is on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and targeting especially these two appliances, the space and water heater. Obviously, if you have solar, you're going to have more electric supply to provide your electric heat pump appliances. So I think, at least from my view right now, and Brian and Corey are way better informed on this than I am. The target of this discussion in this update of the Green Building Code is really focused on this electrification process.
Okay, so Ken asks, what are some potential approaches to accelerating having existing residences switch to heat pumps?
Maybe I will address that because I've actually provided to Corey and Brian a list of a bunch of ideas and approaches that are being used by other jurisdictions around the Bay Area. But just summarizing them real quickly here, main one is a public information campaign, a really aggressive one to inform homeowners as well as installers, actively assist homeowners in identifying scope of work, qualified contractors, and obtaining financial incentives. Marin County is already doing quite a good job on that. Here's a big one: actively assist contractors, installers in obtaining the available financial incentives, because some of them come directly to them. Actively seek additional financial incentives for homeowners and contractors, installers from MCE, PG&E, state and federal sources, and others, in addition to that list that Brian gave. Seek and advocate for non-traditional financing for conversion to electric ready and heat pump. So this is kind of the Ithaca model of basically finding private funding to basically make climate loans to homeowners that get paid back. Because sort of it's being used by some solar installers, as well as on-bill financing, and then, like I said, possible third-party investment financing. Work with MCE to develop direct install and bulk buy programs. This is where MCE would buy 500 heat pumps units and get a discount and reduce the purchase and installation costs. Hire contractors to install 100 units rather than 1 unit. Provide heat pump information at all building permit desks. Actively publicize and provide contractor installer training. Establish building performance standards. Now you're getting into required. Here's a great one. Set goals for a specified percentage of existing residents to be converted to electric ready by specified dates consistent with greenhouse gas emission targets. I know that Mill Valley Climate Committee is looking at exactly that right now. If we don't set some targets, it's not 100% of that as existing residences, but let's set a target to get 10% of them converted within 3 years. Whatever makes sense there, and start tracking that as a metric. And then, of course, there's the primary required type things of replace on burnout, replace at time of sale. So those are some of the approaches, and new approaches are being evaluated all the time. The main thing on this particular subject, I just want to make this point, is really looking to the county and the other jurisdictions to aggregate what actions they are willing to take and make it a formal, strong, highly publicized program. even if it doesn't end up as part of an ordinance, is it a resolution? What's the format of it? I don't know. But we really need to push on that particular category of buildings.
So I'm going to paraphrase a question from Al Grummet, which has to do with the target energy scores for remodels. If the target energy scores are different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, to what extent would contractors regard that as a lack of uniformity that would undermine the entire approach? How important is the uniformity of those targets?
Yeah, that is a very good question. So whenever I say, when someone always says that's a very good question, it's because they don't quite know the answer, but here it goes. So this is no one has really implemented this flex tool. No one has, period. Although I would say Palm Springs is further in the maturity model of this code cycle because it's a new tool, this flex compliance tool. Now, the tool itself is supposed to be flexible. And so the system itself can be seen as consistent. All the target scores, every jurisdiction, depending on climate zone, San Rafael is different than west side of Marin County. They'll have different target scores accordingly. So I guess I could vary the point system, but that's something really we have to explore and see if that is something, applicants will be comfortable with. But the system itself and the checklist, the over-the-counter stuff, I think more so that's what we're looking to really make consistent. So at least it all look familiar, but I think the point systems will definitely different jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I think that was your question, right? No.
Yes. Yeah. It's really more about actually understanding if we've gotten any feedback from the contractor community on that particular point.
And that is a good point to contractor community. And I kind of want to bridge that into David Muller's last answer to the last question. But yes, we are part of that. We're engaging the contractor community heavily through Marin Builders Association, but also individual contractors as well, and discussing them. This hasn't really been presented to them yet. So, this is sort of our coming out party, as it were, this first week. And bridging in David's answer to the last question, or threading that, he mentioned in getting contractors on board, and Al, you're saying this, and it's that I think that is also super important. It's critical to this, particularly to code uniformity and buy-in. Yeah, contractors need just to be there. As Corey mentioned, the contractor is only going to, the design community is only going to say what they know, whoever you client. We also see this in other ordinances where it's either the architect or the structural engineer or the contractor will say, no, you can't do that, but you can't do this. They only know what they know. So a lot of our engagement has to be education. And so we do have a robust engagement process coming up this year. At least we hope.
Okay,
well, I guess one note of caution from the advocates, I speak for myself here, to the extent that there is a preeminent concern about uniformity and it drives us towards a lowest common denominator, you might lose some of the advocates who feel that the point system that ultimately winds up representing that lowest common denominator might be inadequate to accomplish the necessary climate targets. So just a note there.
Thank you for noting that out. Appreciate it.
Can I just jump in real quickly? That's why we have those guiding principles, and that's why the whole thing is set up as drive the greatest greenhouse gas emissions possible. But thank you, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're running about 8 minutes over time-wise. So I'm going to take a couple more questions. A good one from Pam Reeves is, many contractors work in Sonoma County as well as Marin. Are we partnering with Sonoma staff, electeds, and advocates?
We're not partnering with Sonoma staff, although we are resourcing them in terms of saying, hey, will Petaluma pass an all-electric ordinance, had talked to their staff regarding that. And there's a huge network of us practitioners that bleed into there. In terms of that's on the staff level. In terms of contractors, we've identified sort of contractors that work across boundaries, but we really still want to focus on Marin County. I know that is a Redwood Empire community there, so there might be something there. So thank you for pointing that out. And I'm sorry, what was the last question on that? Well, I'll pause there. I think I've.
Pam, did that address your question?
Hey,
Sure, it did. It's just that I'm wondering if electeds across the counties have any communication, or is that a silo to cope with?
A really good
Corey,
question.
did you want to answer?
Yeah, I don't really know. I think it's worth reaching out and finding out. I'm happy to reach out to our CPA and do that. I think it's a good idea. I think that because already 3 jurisdictions in Sonoma have done this, and I think that there's a big push for all the jurisdictions in Sonoma to do this as well. That consistency may be done anyway. It may be just part of what happens this year, but I think you're right. It is important for us to reach out and check, because people do cross the border all the time, right?
So a final question comes from Wendy Collins, and she asks, how can we support low-income people who can't afford to make the switch because the rebate isn't enough? Is there something in addition? And I know, Wendy, you then want to make a comment.
well,
David.
I just want to throw out 1 or 2 ideas on this, because this issue, the social equity issue, it comes up every single time any jurisdiction starts to consider anything regarding existing residences. And obviously it's a extremely important issue and must be addressed. A lot of the ways that people are addressing it is either to have exclusions, like if people, for example, if a homeowner, their furnace, say, goes out and they're unable to obtain financial incentives that would make it cost neutral between technologies, then they're exempted. They don't have to do it. They can replace in kind. Because what we're really talking about here is the incremental difference of installation costs between plugging in back in a gas unit versus a heat pump unit. It's that installation cost is the threshold. So that's one way. Another approach that people are using is additional incentives for income qualified that can even go potentially beyond the cost differential and just assistance. Some jurisdictions are using as an indication of need if you're a registered PG&E care customer. So each jurisdiction doesn't have to, identify the threshold or qualification of the resident in order should they be qualified or not. But those are, and then there's other ideas of a more, what do you call it? A sector or a block or a community type of initiatives. In other words, select one specific geographic area and really focus additional incentives and additional programs on that to help that area. So there are a lot of, it's a primary issue of primary concern, needs to be addressed. The one other thing I would add is the very good news is that for new residences, it's cheaper to go all electric. So, and I think it was maybe Corey touched on that, might have been Amy, is that it's a false choice to say, well, what about, affordable housing? It's cheaper to build new if you go all electric. And just on its face, it's pretty obvious why. You eliminate all the gas infrastructure. So all that piping, all those valves, all those controls, they're gone. So, it's a tough issue. But as I mentioned earlier, we shouldn't let that one issue hold us back on all the other cases where that's not an issue. We need to solve that issue, but let's not let that hold us back.
Well, and I think it comes down to the details, right? I mean, if we're talking about really low income folks, typically they're renters. They don't really have much control over it. There's a split incentive. There's a lot that goes on there. So who's really the applicant? The applicant's going to be the owner of the building, right? So where would this actually happen? And then you can provide some solutions for where we're really going to see this, right? And so to David's point, if it's new construction, well, you know, it's pretty much being addressed because the cost effectiveness is there. And you're providing a healthier indoor environment for folks. Where the challenge comes is in multifamily. And you know, people that have been working at this, MCE and others for years, trying to help replace those awful gas heaters that are just poisoning people. You know, they have to go through the owner of the apartment complex first. And to get them to sign on when they're not going to see the long-term benefits on the energy bill is really challenging. So it really comes down, I think, a little bit less about the policy, a little bit more about the implementation and identifying where are the specific areas where some priority equity community may have some challenges, and how can we provide the solution.
Great. So Wendy, you have a quick comment?
Yeah, first off, I just want to clarify that I was not looking at exempting. I was looking at how we can help them make it happen. And so one constituency to think about is low-income seniors who own their home, who are, what kind of additional subsidies we can find for
Right.
that. The comment I want to make, I think you've put together an excellent campaign, and I have no doubt that just as it is, it will be successful. However, I think this is also an opportunity to get more than the usual suspects involved. This is an opportunity to recruit more activists. And I'd like to see added to your list a way in which we can reach out to people who want to get involved and are not yet involved, and really engaging new people in the process. And as we build these teams, inviting new people to participate in the team, and really developing a database of people who are involved in this, so that once we accomplish this one and then move on to the next ordinance, we have teams in place and keep having the opportunity to recruit more and more people. So that's my suggestion.
Can I add to that? I think in terms of these, whether exemptions or sorry, let me back that up. Addressing equity, we're here to also exchange ideas. So to Wendy's point, I think engaging other communities that had otherwise been engaged, and so we have a focus on that as the city of San Rafael, as the county, other than just the environmental advocates and the community and community-based organizations, or the builders and developers community, but also looking at affordable. We need the housing community, and Wendy, you mentioned the senior living community in on that, and so we've identified some of those stakeholders. I invited some of them to attend today if they could, but it's housing element time for everyone. I'm sure they're engaged highly, but I think that is super important, because they'll have ideas, at least be able to express the pain points and the challenges and exchange ideas with us to understand how we can, maybe it's not legislated, and maybe there's other ways to get at bringing down these costs, because those costs can be real to people. Me as a renter, it'll hurt if I have to. So yeah, I think those communities really need to be engaged. So we have something there. If anyone has any recommendations, particularly those who would be interested and in need of those communities, happy to hear them. So just ping them my way or Corey's way after this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Ken, you started you started this off in the beginning. Do you have any final comments?
No, I think this, I guess what I'd like to say is I think this is a really important initiative we can get done through. And I think that I would just echo David's comments. It's going to require all of us to get involved with our local electeds in order to try and push this through across the board and puts some pressure on to be as aggressive as possible without making the perfect the enemy of the good. So I just hope everybody gets involved in this effort.
Okay, great. So this was
And thanks so much, Brian, Corey, and David.
okay. So this was terrific, and I mean this has gone for an hour and 35 minutes, and really good discussion. What I'm going to do is switch off to the rest of our agenda in the last 20 minutes we have. And the first part is Ken giving us an update on net energy metering 3.0, the CPUC proceeding. Ken?
Yeah, this will be quick. So when we talked about this last month, there was a proposed decision pending that the CPUC had issued, which was going to change the net energy metering program for new residential solar going forward. That met with a lot of concern and criticism. Without going into the details of it, here's where we stand right now, is that right about the time of our last meeting, the CPUC first canceled oral argument that they had scheduled on the issue amongst the parties. Then they did not place it on their January 27th calendar. And then around the first week in February, they announced that it would not come up on the calendar until after further notification. And to me, this is a result of what has been really the unprecedented response of the public to what was in the proposed decision and some concerns about it. The way it was framed, there are issues that need to be addressed as they relate to the current NEM program, but there was concern about these issues. I would just also transfer from Commissioner Aceves, who left the board to take another position and is now assigned to the new chair, Alice Bushing Reynolds. Commissioner Chair Batcher also left at the end of December. So we've got two brand new board commissioners on the CPUC, and I think they're all trying to decide what they're going to do with this. So we all need to stay tuned to what they next come out with, but that's where it sits right now.
Okay. Is there any discussion about this? If not, let's move to reports. Annika, drive.
Bob, you're frozen on my screen here. Go ahead.
Oh.
Sure, thank you. Great presentation, first of all, really interesting and great information as always. I just wanted to share a couple of updates from Cool the Earth. So we've we're just starting to transition our Drive Clean Bay Area collaboration to a new name that is a little bit more broad and inclusive, called Ride and Drive Clean. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen just for a moment because I want to, let's see, just share, if you can all see this. So this is not officially published yet, but we, at the same time as we're launching Ride and Drive Clean, we're also launching a Marin County campaign, Ride and Drive Clean Marin. This is not officially published yet, this website, but I just wanted to give you a sneak preview. There's an opportunity for people to pledge to make their next car electric, well, an EV or an e-bike, actually. A little bit of information about who we are. We have listed all of the jurisdictions here in Marin County and their current adoption of electric vehicles. Talk a little bit more about bikes, and then we have events. We have in the next 2 months coming up, we have 8 events. We have 5 webinars. Each one has a little different flavor here, and we're going to have 3 different EV EV and e-bike showcases or expos, as we say, one in Mill Valley, one in at the Civic Center, and then one up in Novato at the Sports Basement. So for any of you who drive electric and want to join us, please reach out to me and let me know. Because we, with 3 events in 1 month, we're looking for, we don't want to burn out our volunteers. So please join us. And the last announcement is we are actually declaring March and April EV awareness months. So maybe some of you will help us spread the word about that. I'll be sending out notices to our partners in the next few days. Thank you.
Great. Belle, do you have a report on ecologically sound practices? You're on mute.
Okay. The only update is that that the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is now reviewing the ecologically sound practices that were developed 2 years ago, and actually 1.5 years ago, in their various working committees. And that review might take altogether about 3 months. And so we're looking forward to getting a decision from MWPA as to whether these practices, which are rather unique to this fire agency, and we're rather pleased with them, looks like they probably will get approved by the board of MWPA sometime this spring. And we're also working very hard to bring some excellent discussions of our issues to our meetings, and anybody who would like to learn more about it, they can just email me. Thank you.
Great. So Tom, you want to talk about green change?
Yes, just wanted to remind everybody about the big upcoming Earth Day event that's going to be happening at Mill Valley Community Center, April 24th, Sunday afternoon. It's going to be a really fun event, family friendly, mostly outdoors. And there's going to be art, music, games. There's some really clever games, a lot of involvement of young people, and a lot of creative energies going into this event to imagine what 2050 can look like. And we're really very excited that we've got a lot of great collaboration already going on with partners like Drive Clean Bay Area, or Ride and Drive Clean, that is going to have a car show and an electric bike show in conjunction with this event, and Environmental Forum of Marin, OFA, a lot of great partners have already joined in, and we're using our collective effort with this to really try and get beyond the environmental choir, though, to make this a fun event that's going to attract a lot of people, and imagine what 2050 could look like if we all really envision and then realize our vision for that future. So again, just go to our website. You can find out information about it, and join us as a sponsor. If you'd like to have a table there, that's a possibility as well. So lots of good things upcoming with that event.
Great. Bill, Sustainable San Rafael.
Yeah, thanks. We have an important meeting coming up of our city council on this coming Tuesday at 7 o'clock. They'll be considering a new ordinance or revision of code in response to SB 1383, which theoretically requires all mandatory organics recycling. The ordinance is now posted on the city's website. It doesn't quite seem to get there, but I would invite everyone to take a look at it and show up on Tuesday night to advocate for as strong an ordinance as possible. And this is not just San Rafael, it's at least all of the MSS served, Marin Sanitary Service served jurisdictions.
So let me know if, well, check out the website and then I'll see you Tuesday night. Thanks.
Okay. So are there other community organization reports? Raise your hand. if
Sarah,
there
why
are.
don't you go ahead and give the sea level rise
Sure.
thing you were.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Sarah Manzata, your local coastal commissioner, along with Katie Rice. We are setting up an event with Natural Resources Secretary Wade Crowfoot. He's going to be visiting the Marin Canal on Monday, March 7th. It's in the evening time, so community residents can attend, 5 o'clock. And we'll be talking about sea level rise and environmental justice investments in the context of the administration's 30 by 2030 goals. So all are welcome. And if you're interested, you could put your email in the chat and I'll share the information with MCL to share with their lists as well. Thanks.
Great. David?
Yeah, thank you. So I want to report on two groups. As you heard in the earlier presentation, the Marin Sonoma Building Electrification Squad is very focused right now on this Marin County Green Building Code update, and especially on engaging all the jurisdictions to participate and adopt at the same time. But we also have two other things going on. One is we're involved in several cap updates, various jurisdictions. Our members are involved in those, trying to move the dial and push on those to get more aggressive goals and more specific provisions. But we're also really starting to watch these proposals for additional residential housing in Marin. It was mentioned earlier, the neighborhood at Los Gamos, 192 unit apartment complex. We were able to intervene on that and get the developer to agree to go all electric. It really was not on his radar at all. And I think a lot of people on the call here know there's some very large residential developments proposed right now for the Fireman's Fund site, the Northgate Shopping Center, and likely many others. So we're really starting to keep an eye on those. Also on the Marin Sonoma Electric Vehicle Squad, we're focusing on a couple of things right now. A major part of our work that I've reported on before is on getting improved reliability for EV chargers. This is a real issue. Teslas, not so much, but for non-Teslas, reliability is a really big deal. And with a lot of federal funding about to be distributed for build out of EV charging system, we're working at both the state and federal level to make sure that entities that will be administering and assigning public monies have requirements that go with those monies for reliability and performance once these installations are in. We're also working to try and get more EV chargers in underserved communities and multi-unit developments. And then, of course, we're partnering with Drive Clean Bay Area on these various campaigns, including the big campaign Annika was talking about right here in Marin County. Thank you.
And Leslie Alden, you have an announcement?
Yes, thank you. And just kudos to the presentation and the presenters this morning. Just really remarkable, the progress that's being made and the energy that's behind it and the intelligence and the passion. So thank you all for those of you who are presenting and listening and doing all this work. I have a quick announcement. I put it in the chat as well. First Five and the Marin Communications Forum have not done a live event for 2 years. And the first live event coming up is March 18th, a month from today at Embassy Suites. And they've invited Drawdown Bay Area to partner with them. First Five, of course, is focused on making sure that our youngest community members get the best possible start in life so they can look forward to a healthy future. And the title of this event is Climate Solutions for Marin, the Next 5 Years. So it's Friday, March 18th at Embassy Suites. There's more information on First Five's website. And I'm really thrilled to be co-producing this event with them and invite all of you to come. Those of you who want to sponsor, we will be happy to have sponsorship. And I've invited a couple of you to also consider having tables and maybe even be panelists. Anyway, your engagement would be so welcome, and your attendance and letting your own listservs know about this. So anyway, thank you very much. I hope to see you in person.
Richard Holland?
Hello, I just wanted to say from the Open Space Committee that now that the Board of Supervisors has approved Measure A language, that we all also look forward to backing Measure A.
I'll second that. Okay, I think we're at the end of our program, and want to remind people that the next Climate Action Working Group meeting is going to be March 18th. So thank you, folks, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Wonderful today. Thank you.
Well done.